Hello! So we just got back from our first camping trip with the new Palomino SS-1251 truck camper and my 2012 Ram 2500 Power Wagon. So in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about what things went well, what things didn't go so well, and what things I need to address next with the camper and the truck. And I'll talk a little bit about what I think about the Power Wagon as a truck platform for this camper. Okay, so let's start with the truck. Now as it turns out, just before we left, the truck wouldn't start. Now I checked the voltage on the battery, and sure enough the battery had run flat. Now this has actually happened a couple of times before on this truck, and I'm not sure what's going on. You know, the battery is only 2 years old. It's made by Interstate, which in my opinion is a good manufacturer, so it should be able to hold a charge. So I'm not sure if it's just going bad or if something is sporadically draining the battery. But either way, luckily I've been storing this guy here underneath the seat of the truck. It was fully charged. This is a car jump starter. It's made by Buture. I bought it off of Amazon. It wasn't really very expensive. And it has a little lithium-ion battery inside, which helps to jump start the battery. Now, I plugged this guy in, and within 30 seconds I had the truck started back up again, which is great because I really wasn't sure that this thing would be up to starting the big Hemi V8. But it definitely worked. So I'm going to be taking this guy on all future trips as well. Okay, so let's talk about the truck's performance. Now I weighed the truck just after we left, and the camper plus all the equipment plus passengers added 2,500 pounds of additional weight to the truck. Now the only performance item that I've added to this truck is a cold air intake. I'll have to say that the route that we took out has some really steep hills, and I've struggled on these hills before with other vehicles, but I have to say that the Ram with the Hemi V8 and the 6-speed transmission and low 456 gearing didn't struggle a bit. Once we got into the hills, I put the truck in tow haul mode, and that seemed to result in earlier downshifts, and I was able to maintain speed and even pass some slower vehicles. So I think that the camper that I have, this size camper, is a great match for the truck. Now the only downside of the performance of the V8 and the low gearing is fuel economy. So with the truck fully loaded, I averaged almost exactly 10 miles per gallon, and I've averaged 15 miles per gallon with the truck unloaded. Now I'm actually not disappointed in those numbers, although they're not great, but I was actually anticipating 10 to 15 miles per gallon before I even bought the truck. Now as far as handling goes, I have added SuperSprings helper springs to the rear leaf packs in the truck. I've added Fox Performance shocks and a Fox steering stabilizer as well. Now I thought I might have to do some tweaks with respect to the leaf springs, maybe add some preload to the helper springs, or maybe add some supplemental sway control, but I don't really think any of that's necessary. Once I loaded the camper in the truck sat nice and level, and the handling characteristics were actually great, better than expected. I was able to go around tight corners with very, very minimal sway, and it's nice and stable, nice and comfortable out on the highway. I really don't have anything to complain about. Now I did notice an increase in braking distance after adding the camper, but that's to be expected when you add 2,500 pounds of additional weight. Honestly, the brakes are working as anticipated, and I don't really need to upgrade there. Now we didn't do any off-roading in this trip, but the HappiJac camper tie-downs into the standard turnbuckles work perfectly well. I also have a rubber mat in the bed there, so the camper stayed put. I didn't get any sliding or bouncing around. However, back here in the bed is a little bit of a different story. Now these little things down here, these are centering guides, and they're supposed to make sure that the camper is centered in the bed whenever you install it. And they're not centering the camper, so they're not really doing their job. And the reason is that there are little bump stops on the front of the camper which are longer than these centering guides, and those bump stops make contact with the bed before these centering guides do, so the centering guides don't really come into play. Now I have a couple of ideas on how to fix that, and when I get a working solution I'll post an updated video. Now inside the cab here, it's nice and spacious. It's also really comfortable for both rear passengers and front passengers, and there's a lot of storage space, especially under the rear seat here. Now, because of the size of the vehicle, it's not going to be perfectly suited for all off-road situations, and because of the fuel economy, it's also not going to be the perfect overlander. But overall, I think this is a really solid four-wheel drive platform, especially for the size of camper that I bought. Okay, so let me talk about the camper itself. And I'll preface this by saying that we stayed at a KOA campsite. We were there for 3 days. Now, this KOA is really well maintained. This was definitely not a backwoods off-road camping trip. And while we were there, we were connected to electricity the whole time and city water as well. Now I didn't bother connecting the sewer hoses because we were close by to a bathroom that had showers. So there's really no reason to hook up the hoses. I just didn't want to deal with it. So that was the situation, and let me start with what worked well. And one of the highlights of this camper is the Dometic fridge here. It runs off of AC, DC, and propane. It's a pretty large unit. It was big enough to house enough food for 3 people for 3 days. And it gets really cold even when the temperatures outside are hot. Now, it did take a little longer to get down to temperature than I had anticipated, but otherwise I'm really impressed with this fridge. Okay, so let's talk about eating arrangements. So I really wasn't expecting to eat inside the camper while we were there because the weather was nice and we had a picnic table. But we had some really strong winds while we were there, and that brought us in here because we couldn't keep the plates and the napkins on the table. And I'll have to say that I was really pleasantly surprised. You know, with 3 people, myself, my wife, and my daughter, we made this work pretty well, and I really can't complain much. It's a little bit cramped, and you have to ask people to move out of the way if you need to get by. But honestly, considering the space that we're in, it really wasn't bad at all. I do think though that we probably were at our limit of 3 people. A 4th person would probably be a little bit much for this camper. But overall, really can't complain about the eating arrangements as well. This table breaks down pretty quickly and easily, and it just worked out. Okay, so let's talk about sleeping arrangements. So up here is a full queen-size bed. Now I let the girls sleep up here, my wife and daughter, because I actually wanted to see what the worst-case accommodations felt like. Now up here is a nice quality mattress, lots of space up here for 2 people. I didn't really hear any complaints from the girls. Now this is where I slept here, and it's not nearly as much space as up there, but it's quite fine for 1 person my size. Now I could understand where a much larger person or a taller person might not be too comfortable here, but for someone my size or even a child, I think this area was pretty good. I was slept diagonally to kind of maximize the length of the area, and I didn't really have much complaints at all. I slept here for 3 nights without any problems. Now the cushion I felt could be a little more supportive, but honestly it wasn't too bad, and I've definitely slept on worse. Now just like on most campers this size, there's no gray water holding tank. All the water that comes from the main sink just drains out right here. So what I did is I purchased this little 90-degree brass elbow, attached it here with a short hose and a little bucket to catch the water. But with 3 people using the sink, I was surprised with how quickly that bucket filled up. So as a result, I bought a much longer hose with the hopes that it will reach the wood line when I'm camping next time, or at least get it far away from people and from the camper so that I don't have to use a bucket. While I'm over here, I should address the jacks here. Now these are mechanical jacks. There's a little adapter that you can use with a crank or with a drill. Now even with the drill, these are a real pain. If I want to raise up the camper, there's 4 jacks. It takes forever to get it completely raised or completely lowered with just 1 person. So I really want to replace these mechanical jacks with electrical jacks. Now having a roof that can raise and lower definitely has some advantages, but it's also caused me some concerns. And we did have a minor problem with the roof this time around. So when we got to the campsite, I raised the roof all the way to the top, and then we experienced some really high winds. Now those high winds evidently caused one of the lift arms on this corner here to become misaligned to the guide bar here. And I didn't realize it at the time until it was time to go home. I needed to pull down the roof in order to get on the road, and this side here just wouldn't come down. So the way we fixed it is my wife went inside the camper. She pushed on the side of the tent wall on the other side of the lift arm, and that pushed it back into place so it was realigned, and then the top came back down. So the problem was ultimately averted, but having that pop up top definitely makes me nervous at times. Now one of my little add-ons that didn't work out so well is this flooring cover. Now it seemed like a good idea at the time. This is a really nice cushioning material, so I thought I would have something nice for the feet and protect the floor at the same time. This is really an inexpensive piece, but as you can see, it continues to bunch up. I've already shortened this twice now, but it still is bunching up, and I think what's happening is as we walk on it, it tends to stretch out. So I guess I'll have to replace this with something else. Now this area right here of the camper tends to become a bit congested. It's right in front of the refrigerator, and the bathroom doors over here, and you have a pretty narrow hallway, and then here's the exit. So people are constantly moving in and out of this area right here. So there's some congestion, but otherwise I think the camper overall is quite spacious and worked pretty well for 3 people. Now this guy here was a bit of a problem area. This is our propane heater. Now there's no issue with respect to functionality. It kicks on nice and quickly. It puts out a lot of heat, moves a lot of air. and it's connected to the thermostat, and I think it was kicking on at the correct temperature. The problem is with the sound. When this thing kicks on, the fan kicks into high gear, puts out a lot of noise, and it turned on at about 4 o'clock in the morning when the temperature had dropped and woke everybody up in the camper. Now, I don't know exactly how to address this yet, but it's definitely an issue that I need to look into. Okay, so that about wraps up my thoughts and opinions thus far of the Power Wagon as a platform and the usability of this camper for 3 people. So as always, thank you for watching.